Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever episode of Empire Sports Talk. I am your host, Roman Polcha, and before we get started with the first ever episode, I should probably just give you guys a quick little explanation of who I am and what I'm about and what this show is going to be about. So, my name is Roman Polcha. I am 17 years old, and I am a senior in high school. I am an athlete, obviously. I'm going to be having a sports talk show, so pretty obvious. I'm a wrestler. I've been wrestling since I was 5 years old. I am going to be wrestling in college next year at a Division III program around my house. I'm a Central Pennsylvania resident, and with that, I am a huge Philadelphia sports fan. So that will be a pretty big part of the show is me as a Philadelphia sports fan. So I root for the Eagles, Phillies, Flyers, and Sixers. That is going to be a big part of the show. So now that I've given you a small background on myself, Roman Polcha, the wrestler and the 17-year-old senior in high school, the Eagles fan, the Phillies fan, the Flyers fan, the Flyers fan. What is this show going to be about? So this show is going to be about sports talk. Pretty basic, I know. A lot about the specifically what sports I guess I am interested in talking to you guys about would be the Eagles, the Flyers, the Phillies, and the Sixers. And then along with that, I would say NFL news stories, Major League news stories, NBA news stories, NHL news stories. So pretty much just the four major American leagues there. And in addition to that, I would say college football, college basketball, college wrestling, mixed martial arts is a big part of it for me. I'm a huge mixed martial arts fan, UFC fan, and I think that about sums it up. That's mainly the different topics that we'll be discussing. Maybe I'll hop on here and sometimes I'll just want to rant about whatever else is going on in my life or the world around me. And hopefully this comes to be a interesting podcast and a place that you guys can come to listen to a different perspective. There's not a lot of 17-year-old people putting out sports content online, so this will be a different place for you to come and get a different perspective on all that. So this is the first ever episode, and today is, I believe, Sunday the 27th. It's around 12:30-ish when I'm making this. The Eagles are playing the Bengals here at 1 p.m. Maybe I'll make a recap on that or something later, but the main thing that I want to talk about is recapping UFC 308 yesterday, Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway, and maybe a couple of the other fights on the main card there. So the fight in Abu Dhabi yesterday between Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway was not a disappointment. It was a very exciting fight, I thought. I thought the first round, it could have went either way. I thought Holloway maybe got a slight edge. Holloway specifically really started to find his rhythm at the end of the first round on the feet with the boxing, but Ilia had successfully landed a takedown about midway through the first round, although I wasn't really sure, judging it wise, how effective that was. Max Holloway did get back to his feet rather quickly, and in the second round, I thought Ilia, he started to get into his rhythm, but so did Holloway. I thought it was kind of a back and forth second round. I probably would have given it to Ilia, but I think Holloway had his moments. I think whenever Holloway was able to create space and move around a lot, he was able to pick apart Ilia a little bit better, whereas whenever Ilia was able to close the distance and get in closer to Holloway, I think that it was it was all Ilya in that. And then, obviously, in the third round, Ilya gets in real close, and his power for the 145-pound division is something I've never seen before. The only other person who you can even think of that had power like Ilya Topuria at 145 pounds was maybe Conor McGregor. But even Conor McGregor, as we all know, really had power for about a round, maybe two, and he really couldn't put guys away late outside of the exception of Chad Mendez, which was not really a pure knockout like this. And I don't think that anyone in the 145-pound division right now can deal with that power. Now, whenever we're talking about Ilya Topuria and how impressive this win was, it's extremely impressive. And not just is it extremely impressive, this one particular win, but his ability to knock out Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway back-to-back in the same year, in my opinion, makes him the fighter of the year for 2024. Alex Pereira, obviously, lots of big wins this year, but Khalil Roundtree, Jamal Hill, Yuri Prohaska, these wins to me aren't as impressive. Not that those wins aren't also very impressive victories, but nothing is like knocking out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway in one calendar year. I mean, we are talking about two top 20 all-time great fighters, arguably, in Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. So I do think that makes Ilya Topuria the fighter of the year. Also, just with this fight, I think the important thing to talk about is now what's next for Ilya, what's next for Max, and where does this really put them in relative to other fighters in the UFC pound for pound and within their own divisions. So starting with Ilya Topuria, since we're already talking about him, it puts him top 5, easily top 5 pound for pound. And for me personally, me thinking about where I would rank him pound for pound right now, after that victory, it's tough to say, but I'd put him near the top. I mean, I'd probably still have Islam as the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the UFC. And I'd probably have Jones is tough to rank pound for pound currently because of his inactivity, but due to the fact that he's fighting soon, I'll rank him second. And then I'd probably have to say Ilya Topuria, Alex Pereira. I said fighter of the year, Ilya Topuria. I'll put Ilya Topuria third as the third best pound for pound fighter on the planet, right with Alex Pereira at fourth currently. And what's the big next fight for Ilya Topuria? Well, clearly based on the conversation that Dana White had yesterday, it is in the post-fight press conference, it's going to be Alexander Volkanovski. I don't think Alexander Volkanovski really stands much of a chance. I mean, he's a legend, and I respect him, and I'm not going to count him out, but I think Ilya Topuria has to be a heavy favorite in that fight. I mean, Alexander Volkanovski is coming off of 2 back-to-back knockout losses, and Ilya Topuria coming off of he's on fire right now. Knocking out Max Holloway, knocking out Alexander Volkanovski in one calendar year. He's young, he's hungry, and his power and his technique in his boxing is just unheard of for this division right now. Diego Lopez sits in the wings. Diego Lopez is probably next in line. Diego Lopez may then have to fight one more, you'd think, possibly, just due to the fact that Alexander Volkanovski is fighting next, unless he just waits a year or 9 months for a shot. It could be a while of wait for Diego Lopez with the landscape of the 145-pound division shaping up for him to be next in line. And for Max Holloway, then, it is clear he's not going to be fighting for a title anytime soon. So where does that leave him? What big fights are in the division? I don't think Max Holloway is interested in chasing down contenders at the 145-pound division. It's a really hard weight cut for him. And for him to just continue to beat contenders, he's not going to fight for the belts again. Really, it doesn't seem realistic. So I don't think that Max Holloway is going to continue to whip up on these contenders. I don't think that a fight with Diego Lopez really makes sense for Max Holloway at this point in his career, because even if he wins, are you just going to keep on fighting Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski against Ilia Topuria? No, the UFC is going to want to get some fresh blood in there, and for Max Holloway to keep on making 145 without the chance of fighting for a belt seems silly. He is 5th ranked at the lightweight division. I expect him to go back up there. And there is big fights for Max Holloway. I mean, he still holds on to the BMF belt after this fight. So it's interesting to see that and how it plays out with maybe a fight against Dustin Poirier. I know he's already lost 2, but 2 guys that could definitely headline a pay-per-view for the BMF, 2 guys who aren't fighting for the belt anytime soon. I could see a fight like that for Max Holloway, and maybe a fight against someone like Conor McGregor. I mean, Conor McGregor would be an interesting fight for Max Holloway. You got to think he's going to take a good bit of time off here, and he's probably going to be targeting a big money fight. And I mean, who wouldn't want to see Max Holloway fight Dustin Poirier again? I mean, it's an interesting fight, and I think Max Holloway is in a position now, holding the BMF. He can really fight anybody he wants to. He's probably not going to want to fight at 45 again. I think that you'll see Max Holloway take some time off and maybe fight a big money fight for the BMF belt about a year from now at 155 pounds, I think is where you'll probably see him fight next. So now let's talk about the co-main event. The co-main event is interesting. Khamzat Chimaev just absolutely blows through Robert Whittaker, Bobby Knuckles in the first round. He dislocates his jaw, took him down right away, was just smothering him with the grappling. And right now, it's not that much of a hot take, clearly, for me to say that I think there's a good chance Khamzat Chimaev is your next 185-pound champion. The question is, does he fight for the title next? Does he wait for Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis to occur first? I mean, in my opinion, as a fan, and with other fans as well, I believe the interest level for the Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis rematch is probably at an all-time low after yesterday. I think that people are ready for the Khamzat Chimaev title fight against Dricus du Plessis. It's a big fight. I mean, Dricus du Plessis clearly offers something to Khamzat Chimaev that he's never seen before, being that he is by far the biggest person he's ever fought, which is interesting. His grappling is solid. I wouldn't say Dricus has great grappling, but it's solid. He is extremely tough, championship mentality, and his striking is very unorthodox. So with that fight, a possible fight between those two, the size thing is something that Khamzat has never seen before, which makes it interesting. Khamzat, obviously, with only 2 fights at 185 pounds, one against Kamaru Usman, obviously a natural welterweight, and against Robert Whittaker, who's a much smaller 185-pound fighter than someone like Dricus du Plessis. Sean Strickland is up there in title contention, but what's more impressive, Sean Strickland jabbing and front kicking Paulo Costa in a snoozer of a decision, or Khamzat Chimaev absolutely demolishing Robert Whittaker in about 3 minutes. I mean, I think that his performance was much more impressive. I think that he is a much more fearful challenger for Dricus as well. I mean, if you think about it, if Sean Strickland and Khamzat fought today, Khamzat is a mile ahead favorite. I mean, Sean Strickland's lack of grappling would be on full display in a fight against Khamzat, and I think Khamzat is clearly next in line for the belt there. Other fights on the card, just quickly, we can talk through those, and also what's next for Robert Whittaker, and then I'll probably close up shop for the first ever episode of Empire Sports Talk with Roman Polcha. Robert Whittaker, what's next for him? He's an older fighter, obviously a legend of the game, but where does this put him? And obviously he's going to need a long recovery. His teeth were everywhere. A devastating defeat at the hands of Khamzat Chimaev. He's clearly not going to be fighting for a belt anytime soon. I know I said the same thing about Holloway. You're starting to see a change of the guard here a little bit with some of these young guys taking over these divisions. And I could see Robert Whittaker with some big fights. I mean, Robert Whittaker is probably one of those guys, though, at middleweight. You're not going to see him fight someone like Israel Adesanya, who's probably the biggest name in the division, who's also not contending for a belt immediately. Unfortunately, Robert Whittaker ends up probably having to fight some up-and-comers, and we'll see how that goes for him. That's probably what's next, though, if I had to imagine, for Robert Whittaker. He's not ready to retire. I think he still has a lot left in the tank. So you'll probably see him start to face some of the new guard and see how he does in those fights. Some of the other fights on the card. Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige. I mean, that was a pretty exciting fight. I thought it was Dan Ige's fight. Don't get me wrong. I thought he won it, but it was a decision where you're not mad at the judges, I don't think. And Shara Magomedov, holy cow, double spinning back fist goes absolutely crazy, an insane knockout. And Alexander Rakic, and wow, just not a very impressive fight for either competitor in that one. I thought that was a bit of a boring decision. I don't think that either one of those two competitors has what it takes to defeat Alex Pereira at the at the 205-pound division. So, just a little quick sum up of those three fights. Third fight out, kind of boring. Lerone Murphy and Dan Ige put on a show, and Shara Magomedov with an absolutely crazy knockout. So, there you go. That was the first ever episode of Empire Sports Talk with Roman Polcha. Maybe I'll see you guys later today for a recap on the Eagles game. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it and look forward to making lots more content for you in the future. Thank you for viewing. See you later.